Welcome back to part 2 of our London legend, the Theatre Royal Drury Lane in Covent Garden. Last time we looked at 2 out of the 4 incarnations of the physical building, and when we left off, Theatre Royal version 2.0 was nearing the end of a 117-year run. As you can imagine, things were looking a little bit rough around the edges. Richard Sheridan, who you may remember as the theatre's manager, organised for the whole theatre to be demolished and rebuilt. Version 3! Version 3 was a world away from the cosy, intimate theatrical setting of the last 100 or so years. In fact, it was much closer in size to the building we see today. It was the tallest of London's buildings apart from the churches, and certainly one of the largest theatres in Europe. The vast scale of the new Drury did not go down well with the patrons, however. Upon its opening in 1794, theatregoers complained that the enormous space, seating over 3,600 people, lacked the intimacy and coziness of the space they had known and loved. They were missing the warm, close, observant seats of old Drury, in the words of one audience member. The vastness of the space also made it quite difficult for the actors to be heard, and thus was born the age-old tradition of directors standing at the back of the auditorium screaming, "Project!" The new theatre boasted impressive facilities for showy scene changes, which made up, in part, for people not actually being able to hear the lines. In one production, water tanks in the attic provided a real stream and a lake on the stage. The tanks were actually installed as part of new fire safety precautions, along with an iron safety curtain. Remember that little fact. It is important for future events. Spoiler alert. The theatre's legacy of offstage dramas showed no signs of letting up. On May the 15th, 1800, King George III made a visit to the theatre. His visit was unceremoniously interrupted by nothing less than an assassination attempt. Michael Kelly, the resident musical director at the time, had a front row seat to the unfolding drama. When the arrival of the King was announced, the band, as usual, played God Save the King. I was standing at the stage door, opposite the royal box, to see His Majesty. The moment he entered the box, a man in the pit, next the orchestra, on the right hand, stood up on the bench and discharged a pistol at our august monarch as he came to the front of the box. Members of the orchestra leapt out of the pit to apprehend the gunman, a James Hadfield, holding him in a room under the stage until the authorities arrived to deal with him. Meanwhile, in the auditorium, there was pandemonium. It was quickly established that the king was unscathed, thanks to the quick actions of a David Moses Dyte, who had been sitting next to Hadfield. Dyte had seen Hadfield pull the gun and in the nick of time had knocked Hadfield's arm away, sending the bullet up over the king's head and well out of harm's way. As Kelly recalled, "Never shall I forget His Majesty's coolness. The whole audience was in uproar. The king, on hearing the report of the pistol, retired a pace or two, stopped and stood firmly for an instant, then came forward to the very front of the box, put on his opera glass to his eye, and looked around the house without the smallest appearance of alarm or discomposure." The king returned to his seat and demanded that the performance continue, as if nothing had happened. That rather blasé reaction to being shot at becomes all the more astounding when you consider that that was actually his second near assassination of the day. He'd already been shot at while reviewing his foot soldiers in Hyde Park. "Your Highness, I don't want to alarm you, but..." Hadfield's trial was an interesting one because he was the first person to have been deemed insane by the court, but still detained as a prisoner. In other words, everyone prior to Hadfield who had been brought to trial and found insane had been released. New guidelines and regulations were brought into play as a direct result of the Hadfield trial and are still in place to this day. There wasn't really much more of a chance for any unscripted shenanigans to occur. Remember that swanky new iron safety curtain? Well, all that really did was just intensify the awkwardness when the theatre did in fact burn to the ground on the 24th of February 1809 during a production of Mother Goose. Rumour has it that the star of the show, a large canvas and wicker prop goose, broke free of its restraints and took a melancholy drift up through a hole in the attic and away on the wind towards the Lincoln's Inn Fields. Which is not funny. It's not funny. Rather more concrete rumours surfaced that Richard Sheridan, the manager, as we remember, stood serenely in the street with a glass of wine watching his beautiful new theatre go up in smoke. When asked if he was okay, Sheridan replied, "A man may surely be allowed to take a glass of wine by his own fireside."
Mr. Sheridan is not okay.
Version 4! Finally, we reach the Theatre Royal Drury Lane as we know and love it, which opened on October the 10th, 1812. The auditorium is actually smaller than version 3 by some 550 seats, and by 1817 it had become the first British theatre to have gas lighting installed throughout the building. The legacy of the spectacle continued, and audiences flocked to see natural disasters, fantasy landscapes, and adventures on the high seas depicted on the stage. It took a little while and a few more changes in management to get the theatre back on its feet financially post-Sheridan. Even by the 1840s, the theatre was only just keeping itself going. And, as it turned out, it had another, darker secret hidden in its walls. During renovations to the upper circle in 1848, workmen broke through into a hidden room. To their horror, they found a skeleton, greyed rags still clinging to the bare bones, and the dagger that killed him still protruding from the ribs. Very little is known about the identity of this unfortunate man. There has been speculation that he was admiring an actress on the stage and that her jealous actor boyfriend, you know the type, was the one to deal the fatal blow. But apart from that, we don't really know that much. What we do know is that he loves theatre and supports good work. It is rumoured that he only ever appears at the start of a successful run, taking his time-honoured route across the top of the upper circle and melting into the far wall. What a conundrum to be a phasmophobic actor about to start a run at Drury Lane. It would be reassuring to have your approval on this, Mr. Ghost, but if you could do it at such a time when I'm in the dressing room putting on my lashes because I cannot cope with seeing an actual ghost in the theatre, oh my god! The man in grey, as he has come to be known, is not the only permanent resident of the Drury. Another member of the spectral crew, who serves a double whammy of creepiness for the jumpy theatre-goer, shows himself from time to time. Let's talk about Joseph Grimaldi, actor and clown. Grimaldi is known affectionately as the grandfather of modern clowning. His trademark look, white face and red cheeks, oversized clothes and coloured wigs, is what springs to anyone's mind when we hear the word clown. Indeed, this particular image of the clown is known as a Joey. Born into a dynasty of performers, Grimaldi took to the stage at the age of 2. Although his energetic performances dazzled audiences unfalteringly throughout his career, Grimaldi's personal life was turbulent. By the age of 9, his father had died and left Joseph to become the family breadwinner. His brother went to sea at the age of 8, returned for one night and then left never to be seen again, and his first wife and child died a year into the marriage. Years later, another son, Joseph Samuel, would follow in his father's footsteps and take up clowning, but his short life was ruled by alcohol addiction. Grimaldi displayed electrifying energy and great physical prowess during his acts, but his life on the stage took a huge toll on his mental and physical health. Following the death of his first wife and child, Grimaldi leaned heavily on Dr. Theatre, managing to appear in 2 shows a night at 2 different theatres, sprinting through the alleyways between the Drury and Sadler's Wells between scenes. After various illnesses, accidents and emotional breakdowns, Grimaldi was found dead on June the 1st, 1847. But once again, Grimaldi is said to be a pretty supportive spook. Interactions with him range from a gentle nudge to the perfect spot on the stage to a kick in the legs to punish a lazy performance. Sometimes he prefers to sit in the auditorium itself, smiling encouragingly up at the actors on the stage. He's so committed. Go hard or go home. But not all of Drury Lane's ghosts like to be quite as showy. You might catch a whiff of lavender in the corridor, or the tap-tap of a clog dance. If so, you could well be sharing a dressing room with Dan Leno. Leno was a real star of his time. Dubbed the funniest man on earth, he was a hit in the music halls and gave pantomime audiences at the Drury side-splitting performances for over 15 years, appearing religiously as the Dame. Like Grimaldi, he too had an early start to his career, treading the boards for the first time at just 4 years old. He was an extraordinarily talented clog dancer, initially touring with his brother as the Great Little Lenos, and eventually winning the silver belt at the 1880 World Championships. I didn't even know there were clog dancing championships. Also a silver belt. I thought belts were a combat sports thing. Can you clog someone to death? I am dedicated to asking the important questions. Leno quickly realised, however, that clog dancing was not quite having the effect on London audiences that he wanted. His career as an actor and funny man made him a much-loved regular of the London halls. He was an expert in the art of caricaturing the mundane and had a wealth of characters in his repertoire. King Edward VII was a huge fan, and Leno was the first music hall star to give a royal command performance during his reign. There is a lot of speculation surrounding the actual cause of Lino's death, but it is more than likely that he had a lot of things going on, not helped by a worsening drink problem. He spent time in the Camberwell House Asylum before making one last successful hurrah in Drury Lane's production of Humpty Dumpty in 1903, before passing away on October the 31st, 1904. He was said to have suffered pretty bad incontinence towards the end of his life, hence the lavender perfume. So if you're backstage at the Drury and you get that whiff of lavender, just be grateful you're not smelling something worse. And on that note, that's all we've got time for this week. Thank you so much, everyone who has kindly liked, commented, and been generally wonderful and supportive. Now, I am off on tour myself this week, trailing around the country in the back of a van, so there's going to be a little bit of a pause on the London Legends, but I hope when I come back I'll have some better tech. I've got some plans for some things I want to do. If you would like to get involved in any way, I mean, you probably can tell that my editing leaves something to be desired, please do get in touch. If you want to help with the research, if you want to help me out with puppetry or anything like that, please do get in touch. I would love to expand this and continue to make these videos. I'm Paula Brett, and these are the London Legends. I love you. Oh, my beauty. I tried it to a pussycat. She's not having it.